was I to know? How was I to know? You never said what you were looking for, and you never told me so. And now I find after all this time that you won't be back. I know that I can't get through. How was I to know? If you only knew what I'd say to you. After all I tried now, what more can I do? How was I to know? I never thought that it would get this way, and it only goes to show. And now I find you made up your minds. And if I was to say all that I could do, oh, but I know it wouldn't matter much to you. How was I to know? Never told me what you're looking for, never told me so. And now I find after all this time that you want me back. I know that I can't get through. How was I to know? How was I to know? How was I to know? Welcome to Close Listening. I'm your host, Zach Morgenstern, joined as always by silent co-host Ludwig von B. And that was a song by today's guest, Paul McCartney. Well, actually, it's by today's guest, Archie Noble. But Archie is a young singer-songwriter from Sheffield in England who has a remarkable propensity for bringing back the Beatles sound and aesthetic in multiple ways. He rocks the look. I actually think he looks like a young Cat Stevens. Look up what Cat Stevens looks like before the beard and you'll see what I mean, especially in black and white. But Archie has written a prolific amount of songs over the past year on top of his sociology degree. I think he told me he's written 66 songs and put them all online. He creates these fabulous covers for them that look like old record sleeves, and he even puts mono in the top corner. We're going to talk about what exactly that means over the course of this interview, but Archie was a really nice fellow, and I look forward to listening to more of his music. And now is your chance to hear what he has to say. Here's Archie Noble. So I'm joined today by Archie Noble. And Archie, I found you on Instagram around the same time I found another singer-songwriter named Danny Rose. And I don't know if this is a coincidence or not, but Danny's aesthetic makes it really clear that he's following the tradition of Woody Guthrie. And then you have a similar thing going on, except it's the early Beatles. It comes out in your instrumentation, in your album photography, in your vocal harmonies. But how would you describe your relationship? Are you sort of keeping a tradition alive? Does your music just happen to sound this way? What's your deal?
Oof, that's a well. I think I wouldn't say so much keeping it alive, because there's plenty of people doing a fairly similar thing, especially around Sheffield. I think for me personally, it's the Beatles, especially the early music, something I grew up with quite a lot, so it was always on in the house and everything. So I suppose maybe just being influenced by what I'm hearing, what I write. So I'd say as well, especially with that album that you mentioned that I put out last month, I did sort of try and lean into it a bit more than say on some of the other releases, because I thought, well, if I'm gonna go for it, I may as well just go the whole way rather than do what I think some people do. So try and do a little bit of it, but I wanted to try and sort of really grasp what it was that I enjoyed about that music. So sort of breaking down the instrumentation and, as you say, the harmonies and stuff.
Right. And one of the little details I noticed, it says mono in the top corner of your cover arts. I actually know embarrassingly little about sound engineering. Can you break down what that means and why it's part of the sound?
Well, I don't know a lot about sound engineering either, and I think that's mainly why it's in mono. Yeah, so I didn't really know how to mix stereo, but I also felt that it didn't so much matter on this record, partly because, firstly, a lot of those LPs from the early 60s are in mono anyway, because stereo wasn't invented, that splitting sound between two speakers. But also when it comes to the arrangement, as you know, it is quite sparse with just the guitars, the bass, the drums, and the vocals. That there really wasn't a lot to try and split between two speakers. And as soon as I did try double tracking instruments, because normally you double track them and then pan them left and right, but it just didn't sound right. So I just thought, oh, I'll just leave it on one, stick them through both speakers at the same time.
Right. And what kind of musical training do you have before this? One thing I find very frustrating with my own recording is doing vocal harmonies. It never sounds right. Whereas, I mean, I don't know if you sound exactly like John and Paul together, but you sound something like
that. Training wise, I scraped a GCSE in music a couple of years ago. But that's as far as qualifications go. I think, I mean, I suppose mainly most of the stuff I know has just come through playing with people, and especially going out and seeing people live and sort of visualizing exactly what it is that, you know, oh, that person's singing this part, that person's singing that part, and being able to sort of visualize it and separate it out makes it a lot easier. But training wise, no, I've got nothing.
Right. You hinted earlier that there were, you know, several people going for this kind of new Beatles thing in Sheffield. In England, you have the sense that the Beatles are so much part of the culture that a lot of people don't want to touch them because it's overdone, or is there a real scene of people doing what you're trying to do?
It's a bit of a mix of both, I'd say. I think on the one hand, it's definitely true that a lot of people don't try and touch sort of Beatles sounding songs, or well, Beatles songs in other sort of similar bands, Jerry and the Pacemakers and stuff. But it's kind of, there's definitely a sort of a niche group of people that are still into that and enjoy playing it, I'd say, more than anything. But at the same time, it's quite a wide array of different styles.
Right. Are there any particular acts of that era that you don't think get enough attention? Like, this is a bad example, but living in Canada, I feel like most people only know the Beatles and the Stones. So only the last year I just started listening to the Kinks for the first time. And I thought, wow, how have I been missing out on this for all my life?
Yeah, I think, well, that's definitely true. And in fact, something I did find was that a lot of songs, when you bring them up, people think they actually are Beatles songs until you point out, oh, actually, no, this was by Jerry and the Pacemakers, or this is The Foremost, or I think acts that I think are underrated. I do especially like Billy J. Kramer and the Dakotas. I mean, I know that a lot of his early singles were Lennon and McCartney songs, but I often feel he's overlooked because he had some good songs.
Yeah. So you're also part of a band called the Azenas, and I'm guessing based on the dates that was interrupted by the pandemic. But what would you say is the relationship between that project and between solo Archie Noble?
Yeah, well, yeah, as you say, it was interrupted by the virus. So the band really came first because I was in a couple of bands from just people I knew at school for a couple of years, and really the Azenas were formed sort of at the beginning of sixth form, which is kind of 16, 15 here. So I was doing that for quite a while, and basically the plan was that we were going to try and release an album every year. And then it was a kind of an EP project, 3 EPs a year instead. And then, of course, what happened when the virus came in and we couldn't meet up to record anymore, I was kind of just left with a lot of songs that they'd kind of been left off previous releases. Well, left off sounds a bit negative, but we just not got round to doing them. And there was just kind of such a backlog of material that I was thinking, well, we're probably not going to get round to recording this anyway. So that's when I started doing the solo stuff. But at first, a lot of that solo stuff was more folk music, so it wasn't stuff that we were doing in the band anyway.
Right. Yeah, no, you seem to have these two very different sounds. I really liked your album of the live stream where it's completely different. It sounds more like Bob Dylan or other kind of folk songwriters. Are you in two different places completely, or sometimes you're like, I want to write a pop love song, and sometimes you're like, I'm writing really serious lyrics, or do both come equally naturally in the same kind of headspace?
Um, oh well, thanks about the live album, by the way. I'm glad you liked it. I think a lot of the, mm, I suppose, because I went through quite a few different phases, especially because a lot of those folk songs were written probably so Easter 2018, so they were all quite old, and I'd only written them really because a friend of mine was trying to start an open mic night at a pub um, called the Devonshire, which it's not there anymore. And I was turning up, and it was a Sunday night, so the rest of the band couldn't make it. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to just play some of my own stuff. And all the other people that turned up were only playing original songs. So I was like, oh, so I quickly wrote a few.
That's
So
amazing.
that's where most of them came from. But yeah, because I was in a really big Dylan and a lot of other artists. I remember I basically watched Pete Seeger had like a TV program called Rainbow Quest, I
Right.
think, and I just watched all of the episodes of that. And then by the end of it, I was like, okay, well, I'll write something like this, something like that, something like this. Um, Whereas a lot of the more popular songs were written with the band in mind instead. So I suppose really it's um, I'd say the headspace is kind of like the live audience and who's actually going to be there to play the songs with me. Because if it's on my own, I think I'll probably lean more towards that. And then if I'm with the group, I'll do pop stuff.
Yeah, no, maybe it's just coincidental, but looking at your Bandcamp, it looks like one song that comes up again and again, and it's a great song. It's one of the folk ones. It's called "The 20th Stone from the Lamppost." Can you talk a bit about what that song's about?
Um, yeah, so I think I released that last June. I'm trying to remember now because it was a while ago, but I think if I remember rightly, I think I wrote the lyrics to that one first, which I don't normally do. Um, and then when it came to doing the instrumentation, it's not so much like fancy chords and stuff because I think it basically just stays on a D the whole time. And I was thinking, oh, that's a bit boring. So I finger picked it and added in some hammer-ons and pull-offs to try and change it a bit. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say about that one. But actually the title's a bit strange because I sent it into a radio station and they said, oh, what's the title of it? And I said, oh, I don't know. So I just put in some random words and sent it off, and then I just stuck with it.
Yeah, well,
So
I
I
mean,
thought there's no
sometimes
point
random
changing it.
words make the best stuff. I'm sure I'm getting the history wrong, but I think Freddie Mercury used to insist that Bohemian Rhapsody is really about nothing, and yet it's one of the most memorable songs. The one you did is your B-side to the 20th Stone, and I say that because you take the time to like present all your songs as old-fashioned singles. Uh, it's called "What Did You Do for That?" and it's 8 minutes 8 seconds long, so it's a real Bob Dylan kind of epic. I've tried to write lots songs that are long like that. It's really hard. How did you come about to do that?
Well, normally I end up writing too much and then having to go through and cut out the bits that I think, oh, that's not as good as some of the rest of it. Um, but with that one, I wrote it all, and I think it actually had been longer, and I thought this is too long, so I cut it down a fair bit. But yeah, I thought, well, I haven't done many really long songs, and I was pretty pleased with a lot of the lyrics in it. But I think there was someone who like went through it and did like a proper like they like analyzed all the
Right.
lines and references to it. So I was quite pleased to read that because some of the things they picked out I hadn't even done deliberately, but I
So
was
do
I was
you
very
remember any
impressed.
examples?
I think there was a line about, I think in the second or first verse about tin soldiers, and they um, linked it to a song by the Small Faces, I think also called Tin Soldiers.
Uh,
And I've never heard it before, but I checked it out and it was a good song actually. So that was quite nice.
yeah. So when you're writing something long like that, though, is it because there's a story in your head, or you just naturally have a lot of words to say?
I think once I start, I just struggle to finish really. And that's with kind of all the songs. Because I always think, well, I'm going to need about 3 verses. So I sort of write 3 and then I think, oh no, I'll do this one instead. So I write a different one. And then I, like 40 minutes later, I think, oh no, this will be better. And by the end, I've got 12. And I think, right, I need to sort this mess out.
Yeah, no, that's an amazing talent. Like I can't speak for other songwriters, but for me, an idea in my head is the chorus and what the song's about, and I get that out in one verse, and then I have to force out two or three. So it's a real gift that you have all those words. So just keep going with it.
Cheers.
Uh, so I guess what's next for you? You've had your early Beatles phase. Are you gonna have your Sergeant Pepper's phase?
I think as it stands, I'm planning just to stick with this for a little bit longer. Just because I think after I got the last album out and I listened back to it, I thought, oh, I still think there's a few more things I could kind of squeeze out of it, because I ended up leaving about 4 or 5 songs off it because it was getting a bit too long.
Wow.
And there's a few unfinished stuff that I'm still working on. But yeah, I think definitely a lot of the songs that I'm playing with the band at the moment, because we've been able to start meeting as of the last couple of weeks as the restrictions have eased. So I brought them some new songs, and I'd say they're a bit different again, really. Maybe not Sergeant Peppery, but they're a bit more.
Right.
I don't know what I'd call them, but they're certainly not early Beatles or folk. It's sort of a third thing. Yeah.
All right. We'll just say Rubber Soul, and if you're not, that's right.
Oh yeah, yeah, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Great. Well, it was great to talk to you. Can you share one of your songs with us?
Yeah, thanks very much for having me. It's much appreciated. Yep, I think I've got my guitar ready here. Not got too much space here, but I'll see what I can do. Excuse me.
That's part of the aesthetic.
Okay, so I was going to play a song that was on that live album that was mentioned. So this is called The Curious Affair. Pack your bags, he said, waking you from bed, it's time we leave. Take just what you can carry, and we'll find a way to manage, I believe. But keep a candle in your window so they won't know until morning that we've flown. And check twice, there's no one looking, as you flee the only home you've ever known. Down many roads you race, no destination and no place you're aiming for. And you hope you've not been missed, with your feet so sore and blistered, red and raw. You make friends along the way, but he insists you can't stay with them very long. But their kindness is a comfort, you remember, to keep you going strong. We must keep going forwards to shake off those who follow us along. Though you're sure that he's deceived, but you do not dare to leave him on his own. Maybe you should find a place to rest, only just for a while. Lately, you've so little left, you find it hard to smile. And as he thinks you're sleeping, but you hear the floorboards creaking by the door. and he rubs you as you're sleeping, watching as he's creeping across the floor, wondering what tempted him to enter. You're so tense you fear you'll burst, and you're frozen for a moment, scared stiff as if under some wicked curse. That figure in the doorway, you follow through the hallway and feel the worst, and you watch him as he's counting the pennies that he's taken from your purse. His face seems unfamiliar as you look on and you shiver to the bone. Lady, all you want is to be back at home.
Amazing. I was trying to think about what it reminded me of, and it's a bunch of things, but really nothing. So it's the best combination. Archie, thanks so much, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks very much. It's been a pleasure, and thanks for having me again.
So that was my meeting with Archie Noble. One of the interesting things in arranging that meeting is like he used the expression cheers a lot. And I talked to my dad, who is also English or English and Scottish, and he was like, oh yeah, that is a kind of a catch-all expression in England. But you learn new things every day, and I don't know, I think I made a bit too much of this cross-cultural experience. England and Canada, USA aren't necessarily that different, but I don't know, when you're hanging out with a guy who seems like the reincarnation of John Lennon or Paul McCartney, you kind of get overexcited about that. But anyway, Archie was a really nice guy, both during and after that interview, and it sounds like he's going to put out a lot more music, both potentially as a solo artist and with his band, because he has so many ideas, and it doesn't even sound like it's conscious. They just naturally come to him, and he can't help but writing. So I look forward to hearing what he has to do going forward. Anyway, check out more of these interviews and more of my album reviews. I'm Zach Morgenstern. This is Ludwig von B. See you next time.